how to check organizational cholesterol level through a particular instrument. We talked about the types of organizational change and assessing the readiness of organization to change. In the last class, we talked about organizational culture, organizational structure, individual responses to change. In that, we looked at the various people in the organization, types of people in the organization, who and their response to the change would differ from who they are. They could be elephants, they could be lions, they could be hawks, they could be deer, turtle, right? So depending on who you are, your response to organizational change would differ. Uh, Not that like each of these animals, they bring in something to the table, and organization can leverage what they bring to the table, right? Then we very briefly talked about Kurt Lewin's model of individual change. We had a look at Lewin's model, which is about unfreezing, changing, and refreezing. And we will go a little deeper into the Lewin's model today. So this is what our today's agenda is. We will go deeper into the Kurt Lewin's model for individual change. John Cotter's model of change, 8-stage model. We will go into that, and if time permits, we will also talk about communication strategy. Once the organization decides to go in for organizational change, the same needs to be communicated across the organization to all the stakeholders. What kind of channels one should use, how often the communication should happen, who should communicate, what is the content of the communication, all those things we will talk about towards the later part of the session. All right. So in the last class, we talked about organizational change begins with change in individuals, right? In fact, this is kind of axiomatic. Like it begins with just one individual, right? So I would actually very strongly recommend you to read one book, which is it's a John Cotter book. It's a parable about change, how it happens, who leads change, and there are no-nos in organizations who fight tooth and nail for against the change. The name of the book is Our Iceberg is Melting, and it's a very short book. I think about 100 pages, 125 pages, and it won't take more than 2 hours to read that book. I would strongly suggest. Okay, the name of the book is our. Hang on. Our Iceberg is Melting. This is by John Cotter. In fact, we would be. Yeah. So. So I have mentioned in the chat box the name of the book, Our Iceberg is Melting, by John Carter. So I would strongly recommend that each one of you must read that book. Must read that. It's like a story, right? So not much stress on your brain, but it's a very beautiful story. Okay. The individual change, this again, we saw this slide in the last class. Individual change occurs at 3 levels. It occurs at the cognitive level. Okay, which book I have mentioned in the book. Sorry. Okay, you logged in a little later, right? Okay. All right. Bhumi has mentioned the book. Our Iceberg is Melting, John Carter. All right. Cool. So individuals, they change at three levels. They change at cognitive level, at behavioral level, and at attitude and value level. Uh, it's something like any training process, any learning. It happens again at three levels, right? So cognition, it has the same root as recognize, right? Recognize. What do you do in recognition? Like you try and like make meaning out of something. So that's to cogitate or to recognize. So similarly, change has to be recognized, or the need for change has to be recognized. So in fact, that's where the change begins. Unless you recognize the need for change, change will not happen. In this book, our iceberg is melting. So one of the characters, that is Fred, he's the person who actually recognizes that the iceberg on which they live, it is melting, and they need to do something about it. And the change process started with that, right? Cognition. So what they know and what they understand, what this person or the person who actually recognizes, he or she is the primogenitor of any change which happens in an organization. So once you recognize the need for change, that is the cognitive level, then if you just sit on it, then that's of no use. Now, what are the behaviors which will be required of the person who recognizes the change for change to happen, right? So, what is the behavior? Like if you realize that your iceberg is melting, then you have to find another place where the community need to go to ward off disaster. Uh, See, this book, Our Iceberg is Melting, is about a colony of penguins, and they need to stay on an iceberg. They get their food, they stay there, they multiply there. But if the iceberg melts, right, and melts into the water, then they have nowhere to go, nowhere to build their nest, nowhere to lay their eggs, nowhere to rest, nowhere to get their food. So they have to do something about it before the iceberg melts completely, right? So what kind of behaviors are required to be undertaken so that they address the problem which they see, and see to it that they have a alternate scenario which is more beneficial to them. So they have to indulge in those kind of behaviors. So they need to take action, right? So the first stage is cognition, second stage is behavior, that is action, and third stage is the your behavior and actions, they become your attitude or values. They become second nature to you. Why is it important for the actions to become second nature? Because the people who have started the change, they will retire, they will leave, right? And how does the organization continue to grow? How does the organization continue to address the change which is required? only when the new employees who join the organization, they carry on the battle, and they carry on the mantle from the existing employees. They pick up the baton and run themselves. And how does that happen? It happens through acculturation, passing on the values and accepting, adopting the values by the new employees, new entrants. That's how it happens. So individual change occurs at these three levels: cognitive level, cognition, behavior, and attitude and values. We also in the last class talked about how does change stick, right? Or how does change happen? Change happens only when the resistance to change is lesser than the readiness to change. If the readiness to change is of weaker value than the resistance to change, then the resistance trumps and change doesn't happen. So your readiness to change must overcome the resistance to change. And we introduced the Kurt Lewin's model of individual change of unfreezing, changing, and refreezing. And we will be going deeper into this model today.
Sir, in practical world, what happens? The individual change first or the group change, and what is more beneficial?
It's always the change follows this path. It's never the other way around. The first stage is always cognition, because unless you recognize the need for change, the change is not going to happen. And recognition of change may be at any level in the organization. In fact, if you read the book Our Iceberg is Melting, it is Fred who is just another penguin. He's a common citizen in that colony who first recognizes that the iceberg is actually melting. And he goes and talks to uh, Alice. Alice is one of the 10 elders in the Elders Council, and who takes it up in the council and makes things happen. So the recognition or cognition of for the need for change must happen first. Then the action starts. Once the it's a known fact that change is required, and uh, the need for change has the requisite backing of the people who are in charge for the change to happen. And then once that has happened and change process has begun, to sustain the change, the need for change in attitude and values would be required. So
Sir,
it's
the book.
always the
Sir,
individual.
and
It
sir,
starts with the individual rather
this book
than the
you are
group.
saying is more of
I'm
fictional.
sorry.
Sir, आपने जो example दिया, that's more fictional. Does it
Yeah,
really
yeah,
happen in practical world?
yeah,
Like
it
the
does.
seniors telling seniors कि ये गलत हो रहा है, and seniors recognizing it, acknowledging it. Does it
Mhm.
really happen? I mean,
Okay,
I
but
find it more story.
what's your view? What's your view?
I have seen that they do not listen to juniors, even though they should.
Okay,
They
okay,
should definitely, but somehow it becomes a challenge. And kabhi kabar to because it's a junior who is telling, ego issue aa jata hai.
right. You're right. In fact, in this fictional account, that there are people who are called no-nos. Hang on, let me just yeah. Hang on. Okay, yeah. So those are the people who are known as no-no. And in every organization, there are no-nos, right?
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So idea is to find such people, like in this fictional account which I'm talking about, there is someone who is called Alice, right? And Alice is only one of the seniors who actually listens to Fred, who talked about the iceberg melting, right? So even if you are at a junior level in an organization, you have to find your own Alice, right? There will be no-nos. In fact, no-nos will awfully outnumber the Alices in the organization, right? So no-nos, you cannot wish them away. They are in all organizations, right? But idea is to find your allies and pitch your ideas to the allies in the organization, and it is possible. It is possible. It's not that the organization is full of no-nos, at like 100% of them are no-nos, right? My experience of the last 40 years is that for every 9 no-nos, there would be an Alice. At least 10% of the organization would be Alice. It's your ingenuity to find the Alice in the organization. And
Okay.
yeah, right.
And sir, if
Anybody?
you there is an external OD supporter,
Yeah.
even the same logic applies, right? Or it has to be applied in a different way.
See, OD, like a OD expert, an external OD expert, cannot do anything unless the backing of an Alice in the organization is there, right? He or she cannot just come and say, okay, there's something wrong with your organization. They will just tell him that you go to hell. There's nothing wrong with the organization. So the realization, that is the cognition part, right?
Hmm.
Cognition must come from within the organization, never
Right.
from outside, right? An external expert cannot do anything as far as this stage is concerned, the cognizant stage. Cognizant stage must come from within the organization, either the CEO or somebody in the senior management, or even somebody in the junior management who has the ear of a Alice in that organization. Else the external expert cannot do much as far as the organization change is concerned. Does that make sense? Uh, does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That makes absolute logical sense.
Right. So, in the last class, we also talked about the various animals in organizations. You have turtles, you have hawks, you have lions, you have deers, and you have elephants, right? These are people, right? And these animals bring in something or other to the table, right? They have some contributions which the organization can make use of while the organizational change happens, right? Say for example, the hawk. Hawk brings in a very broad perspective, because hawks, they fly above the clouds, and they have a bird's eye view of the organization. So they know what's happening or what could happen, and they contribute to the organization, systemic thinking, analysis, non-emotional response, because they fly so high, they are not too much into the ground. So they bring these positives to the table, whereas they may the negatives which may flow from the hawks could be like they would miss the emotionally charged atmosphere during the change process, because they are far above the ground, and they may alienate their own colleagues. Similarly, the elephants, the deer, the turtle, the lion, they bring in something or other to the. So, idea is, if you are an OD expert, or you are an organizational change management expert, and whether it's internal or external, The idea is to recognize these animals in the organization. If you are helping the organization to manage the change process or manage the OD intervention in that organization, you need to recognize who these people are, which kind of animal they are. Are they lions? Are they elephants? Are they deers? Or are they turtles? Are they hawks? And use the whatever they are bringing to the table for managing the change you are helping the organization to manage, or the wood intervention you are helping the organization to implement. So enlist these people. First is to recognize these people, who they are, and
So,
then enlist
is there
their
any
support.
test for
Yeah.
this? Is there any test for this, like a personality test, or we have to do it
No,
by
no.
individual
Yeah, yeah.
observation only?
You have to use your observation skills, and of course, as external or internal. If you are internal expert, actually, you would. They are your colleagues, so you would know who they are. But if you are an external expert, then you have to necessarily meet as many people as possible, talk to people, interview people. Then you would come to know who they are, right? So first of all, you have to recognize who they are, and second is try and bring them on board and use their expertise or what they bring to the table to advance the change which you are helping the organization to implement.
Yes, sir.
All right. Gordon-Levin's model for individual change, it goes through three stages: unfreezing, changing, and defreezing. I think in the last class I was talking to you regarding my own story about unfreezing, changing, and rephrasing. When I mean it was a literal story of unfreezing, changing, and rephrasing when I was in Dubai. So I would actually cook once a week on Fridays, and I would go to the hypermarket and get sadia chicken. They were the chicken from Saudi Arabia, and I would unfreeze them, cook, and refreeze them to be consumed the next whole of next week. So the change is a similar concept where you have to necessarily unfreeze because most organizations are hidebound and they are virtually frozen. The systems, the processes, procedures, everything is frozen in that organization. And since these frozen systems, they do work for the organization, and they do work in the sense the organization has come to what it is today because of those systems, right? So and they continue to hold these systems which are dear to their heart, and they don't want to change. So any change which needs to be brought into the organization to face a future which is different from what it was in the past, you have to necessarily unfreeze the frozen systems. You have to necessarily unfreeze the frozen processes and procedures before you can think of any changes. So uh, these processes need to be unfrozen. Then the change happens. I mean, of course, change doesn't happen on its own. You have to the internal change experts and external experts need to work together for the change to happen, by learning new concepts, tweaking the systems and procedures, uh, and then the refreezing needs to happen. The new systems, new processes, new procedures, new thought systems, values need to get refrozen again for it to be of any use to the organization. So this is how Lewin described chain process of unfreezing, changing, and refreezing. Right. So So the first stage is that of unfreezing, and in that stage, uh, the first and foremost is the cognition, which we had talked about, the need for change, and it always starts with one person. It's never that the change, the need for change comes from a committee meeting or in a board meeting. So even if it is discussed in a board meeting, one person, whether it is the CEO or one of the board directors, who would actually bring forth this topic on the table, and that is discussed, and maybe some buying happens. So the first and foremost is to create the motivation and the need to change, and the first and foremost for a person who brings in this topic of the change, the need for change, needs to convince others that the equilibrium or the status quo will not take the organization to very far in the change scenario or in future, and what worked in the past may not work in the future. So the status quo equilibrium needs to be disconfirmed for the change to happen. So, this person needs to show how the current state is mismatched with the need of the future, and for the organization to be competitive, it needs to change. And the person also needs to highlight the dissatisfaction with the current state of affairs, and also the threats. Like we had said in an earlier class, that change needs to happen for three reasons. One is dissatisfaction with the current state of affairs. Second reason could be the organization wants to make good uh, any mishap or any lacuna in the past, or it wants to grab a bigger pie in the future, right? So these are the three reasons why change happens, right? So say for example, if the auto company, Mahindra and Mahindra, they have started investing in a big way in automatic the electric vehicles as well as self-driving vehicles. So they see the future, right? And they want to grab a piece of the pie for the future, in the future business. So that's being forward looking, but they could have a change initiative which would address any problem they may be facing in the current scenario, or they could want uh, to engage in change for something they might have missed the bus in the past, right? So in any of these three situations, change happens, and the status quo equilibrium needs to be disconfirmed before the change happens. And the survival anxiety must exceed the learning anxiety. Like for anything new, you have to learn, right? So like when computer was introduced in many organizations in the early 90s, the existing employees, they resisted a lot against introduction of the computer, because they have to learn a lot, like the hardware, the software, and the way of doing things in the organizations. So there was anxiety of learning, anxiety of maybe losing your job, anxiety of whether you are good enough to learn the new stuff. So, but there were other people who saw the writing on the wall and saw that the computer is the way of going forward, and unless they learn the new gadgets and new software, they will fall behind, and they may be replaced by younger and more nimble people who are computer savvy. So they would lose their job, right? So that's the survival anxiety. So they willy-nilly started to learn the computers, and so that they could survive in the organization, and they could hold on to their job. So the survival anxiety exceeded the learning anxiety, right? So they overcame their hesitation, to learn something new, and that's how they survive, right? So for a change to happen, the survival anxiety must exceed the learning anxiety. Uh, while this is happening, the people are trying to learn new tricks, people are trying to learn new concepts, new systems, processes. It's very important for the leaders, for the managers to create psychological safety to reduce the learning anxiety. Apart from giving the opportunity to the employees to learn new stuff, the managers also need to spread out the psychological safety net for them. And how does one do that? There are a number of ways in which the psychological safety net can be drawn to give comfort to the employees. Uh, the first is to provide a compelling positive vision, right? To provide a compelling positive vision to the employees, how the future is going to pan out, and how the change which is being proposed is going to safeguard the interest of the organization for a future scenario, and that vision must be compelling for the organization, for the employees to cling on to. The second is formal training, of course, especially in groups. So individual training, the group training is actually trumps over individual training, because one, they learn from each other, peer learning, that was called peer learning. And second, they also, there is a positive competition amongst the employees when they are learning in a group rather than e-learning individually. So formal training, especially in groups. Practice field coaches feedback, like once you have learned a concept, once you have learned how to use a computer or a software, giving the people opportunity to practice, to give them feedback once they are practicing. So that goes a long way in providing a safety net, psychological safety net to the employees. Provide positive role models, and those positive role models can be within the organization, or even in a external environment. so that the employees know that it is possible. Like people like you and me are doing it. So if people like you and me are doing it, why not me, right? So positive role models, support groups, create support groups for people uh, in the organization, the self-help groups, interdepartmental groups, which will support during the change process, and consistent systems and procedures. That's where the refreezing happens. Like once the systems they undergo change, they need to be refrozen for the organization to function smoothly and seamlessly. So I'm sorry.
Ask
Yeah,
a question
go
on
ahead.
this.
Yes, Benita.
Unfriendliness.
Previous
Uh,
slide. Yeah,
yeah. So, sir, this is the phase where I think the anxiety and fear is at the peak,
yeah, yeah. That's right.
right? And
Right.
somehow the no-nos are the loudest here.
Yeah, yeah. That's right. That's right.
So when you are practically doing it, I'm asking it because this is something I did face. I was trying to convert my reporters who were completely on computer to mobiles.
Hmm.
Okay, we had asking everybody to go Mojo.
Yeah,
So mobile
yeah.
journalists. So what was it? They were like very anxious, and
Hmm.
they were worried कि नहीं कर पाएंगे. All this what you are saying is there, but we had provided them mobiles, we had provided them SIM cards, we had provided them like almost unlimited data,
Hmm.
but still they were just coming up with problems and problems and problems. Uh,
Hmm.
even after 15 days of training, whereas this requires just 2 days.
Yeah.
So when do we, then start kicking the butt, as sort of to say, like because they're afraid and the no-nos keep on repeating, repeating, repeating. So if I'm creating a structure for unfreezing, do I
Yeah.
keep this in mind, and how do I do that?
All right. So I have this question. I'll just park it for now. And once we are through with the all the three stages of this live-in model, then we'll come back to this question of yours and see whether we have already answered it. Right? Is
Thanks,
that
sir.
okay?
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 We are going to deal with this question. All right. So the individual responses depends on which animal you are. But no matter which animal you are in the organization, uh, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she talked about 5 stages in the change process, and which is common to everyone. Uh, the stages are shock and denial, and it comes in that order. Mind you, the order doesn't change, uh, and depending on actually who you are, which animal you are, the just like COVID, it is milder for some people, but it is very devastating for others. Some people have a CT value of say 25, 30 in the RT-PCR. But some people they get affected much more. They would have a value of say 9 or 6, which is devastating. So depending on your immunity, your response to the virus is different. Similarly, depending on who you are, your shock when the change happens would be different for different people, right? But uh, uh, to certain extent, these 5 stages everybody goes through. And the first stage is shock and denial. That when the change happens, you are in shock, and people actually deny that it could not be happening to me, right? uh, and people start asking questions like why me, right? So The second stage is anger. When you are past the first stage, that is shock and denial, you enter the stage of anger, right? Why me? Why not? Why am I being singled out for this treatment? Uh, and then what happens is bargaining, right? So if I feel that I may lose my job, or I may be out of the in group, so I would start bargaining, right? uh, for a better deal, right? And that's the third stage. Fourth stage is depression, right? So if I've gone through all the three stages and the bargaining doesn't work, then I get into depression. And how does one behave when one is into depression? In an organization, somebody would start absenting from office, or absenting either physically, or withdrawing from the day-to-day activities. So that's the depression stage. And once you are through with the depression stage, and you see that the change is here to stay, right? So either you move out of the organization, or if you are
Can't you, yeah?
staying in the organization, then you have to accept. You have to accept what the changes, and try and adjust to it, and make the most out of it, right? So these are the five stages of individual response to change: shock and denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Uh, all right. So in the denial stage, what happens is the individual believes that the problem will correct itself, that it's a passing phase, and things will it like the saying which goes like, it'll pass. So people are like ostrich type. You bury your head in the sand, and expect that the storm will pass. So that's one behavior. Another behavior could be individual displays apathy or numbness in the face of change, or individual tries to rationalize the change, right? Anger stage, individual tries to sabotage change effort. The individual tends to shoot the messenger. Individual withdraws from the team. So these are the reactions of the employee in the anger stage. Bargaining, the individual tries to cut a deal to spare himself or herself, and to save his turf. Individual tries to direct problem solving away from the change. And the depression stage is where individual absenteeism increases, and acceptance, as I said, that that's the final stage where the individual or the employee has accepted that the change is here to stay, and they try to make the most out of it. Okay, so now individual responses to change, it goes through the three stages again, which is on your screen. The resistance to change will give way to the neutral zone, and then the new beginning starts. What happens during the resistance stage? The resistance could actually be because of three reasons. One could be blind resistance, nobody. There's saying that nobody likes change except a newborn baby, right? So, so the resistance comes naturally to people. Resistance to change comes very naturally to people. So it could be blind resistance, or it could be because of political resistance, in the sense, whether you like it or not, there are there is office politics or there is organizational politics. And who is it that is leading the change will depend on whether you are supporting the person or opposing the person. So that's political resistance. And there could be ideological resistance, like the union, when the government is keen on divesting the public sector undertakings or privatizing the, say, the banks. So there will be ideological resistance from certain quarters because of ideological reasons. They oppose the change. So the resistance could be because of any of these reasons: blind resistance, political resistance, or ideological resistance. So, what happens in the first stage where people look at the change as if it's the end of the world, or it is they are losing something, or so the possible reactions to of people during this stage are, like I said, the five stages of individual reaction are sense of shock, fear, fear of the unknown, because they are comfortable. They are in their comfort zone in the present scenario. And if anything, any change happens, then that's the fear of the unknown as to what will happen. Then there is resentment, apathy, and a sense of loss. So these are the possible reactions to change happening. And if these are the reactions, and you are the manager, you are the leader, what is it that you should look out for? How does these reactions get translated into behaviors? So the behaviors which you should look out for to convince yourself that people are going through this first stage is people will start asking questions. Who care I am? And how am I going to get affected? And why do we need change in the first place? We are happy the way we are. If something has worked and it has worked well for the organization, why get into something which we are not even familiar with? So asking questions, challenging, we talked about the no-nos in the organization. They will challenge your understanding of the situation, and they will have a number of arguments as to why your understanding of the situation may not be right, right? So challenging the understanding of people leading the change, complaining about what's happening, failing to see any positive outcomes, and some people also would have problem in their personal lives. They'll have problem in sleeping. They would withdraw from the activities in the organization, and they'll be withdrawn, and they'll start blaming for every little thing in the organization. So these are the behaviors which the leaders need to watch out for. And how do you handle this stage? Handling this stage, you need to identify what each individual will be losing, right? So not although everybody is in the same situation, they may not be in the same boat, right? Say, for example, if there is a if it's a, say, merger, and when merger happens, there are many people who would actually be duplicate. So there would be, say, two finance heads, there would be two HR heads, there would be the commerce function may be having parallel function. So those are the people who would actually be much more concerned than say, departments which are not common between the two merging entities. So identify what each individual would be losing rather than painting everyone with the same brush. Accept the employees' reactions. The employees' reactions are, they stem from their own realities, right? You can't just wish their reaction away. So the emotions which they show are real, right? And as a leader, as manager, you have to accept those reactions which are real. And accept does not mean that you play along. Accept is basically to acknowledge that these are real emotions and these need to be addressed, right? Be open about losses and show empathy to those affected. Don't say that हाँ सब कुछ चंगा है and कुछ नहीं होगा, because there would be some consequences, right, of change. So some people would lose out, and acknowledge that it's going to happen, and show empathy, and try and make these their losses more bearable. Like if some employees have to be they have to go, then make it a little easier for them to go, in the sense there are organizations who do provide outplacement services to their employees so that they find a job elsewhere, or introduce a voluntary retirement scheme so that apart from the statutory dues, they get a little more than what the legally they are due for. Uh, Give them the help of maybe some counselors, some psychologists to cope with. I don't know. Have you anybody who has seen the movie Up in the Air?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you have seen that. Okay, okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. So those who have not seen, do watch it. It's really nice as to how, of course, it's a story, but it's possible for how firing actually takes place in the West. Okay, so look for ways to compensate your employees for their losses. This we have discussed. Provide your employees with a lot of information. There's uh, no amount of information is more. So give them lots and lots of information so that one, they are aware, and second, they can fend for themselves if they have loads of information. Don't hold back information. Show care and concern for your employees. Ask for reactions. Sometimes the best way to handle emotions is to let the other person speak, right? So and let off their steam. Listen and pay attention to what you are hearing. Allow people time to grieve. Some people may have to leave the organization, and they may have very close friends who are working in that organization who may get to stay. So those who stay, let give them time to grieve for their best friends who are bound to leave, and yeah, respond to questions, give a lot of information to people, answer their queries, have town halls, if not physical, even virtual town halls are okay. So this is the first thing. Second is the phase two is the neutral zone. Mind you, the in the first stage you have all kinds of emotions being thrown around, all kinds of in the second stage, the unfreezing has happened, mind you. Unfreezing has happened, and the new world order has not come in, right? So it's a world of a lot of chaos. uh, so the systems have broken down, the processes are in disarray, and the new systems and new processes have not come in, right? So you are at this stage. So what do you do in this stage? Like, what would be the reaction of people who find themselves in this stage where the systems have unfrozen, people have no anchor, people have nothing to hold on to, and the new systems have not come in. So the reaction could be anxiety, right? There's no anchor. There's the floor beneath your feet is gone, right? So you are virtually hanging in the air. So there'll be a lot of anxiety, a lot of confusion, and there'll be decreased motivation. We are talking about people who stay on, right? And there could be some hope that you see the light at the end of the tunnel. And what kind of behaviors you can watch out for adjustment, for bargaining, and willingness to get involved. What do you do as leaders? Talk to your staff and faculty about the feelings they can expect at this stage. Feelings is very important, and you need to spread out a psychological safety net for these people. Listening is very important at this stage. In fact, listening is very important at all the three stages. More so at this stage because people have lost their moorings. People have nothing to cling on to because the old order has gone and the new order has not come in. So people have a sense of loss. They have lost the surety of the past, and the hope of the future has not yet materialized. So they are kind of in a limbo. So anxiety, confusion are the rule of the day. One, you need to address that. Second is, till the new policy systems come in, you need to create some temporary policies, procedures, structures. It may not be perfect, but it will work at this stage. Strengthen the connections within the team, whoso has, especially if it is a merger and acquisition, then you need to build new teams with people from both organizations, and build bridges and bonds between the teams. Encourage your employees to think of new ways of doing things, involve people in trying out the ideas. Like, mind you, one of the behaviors which you will watch out for is willingness to get involved. So whosoever is sticking their neck out to help the management or to help the organization to tide over this stage and move on to the next stage, grab those people, because they are the people who are no longer sitting on the fence. They have jumped the fence and come onto your side. So involve them, involve the people who are trying out the ideas. Start training people in the new skills they will need, and continue to explain the purpose and the plan of the future. So these are some of the things which leaders need to do. Now, the next stage is the new beginning. Next stage is where you are past that neutral phase, where the old order has crumbled and the new order is yet to come. But in the next stage, the new order has come. So you have actually switched over to a new era, new paradigm. So the possible reactions of the employees are more positive than in the previous two stages. There is a lot of energy amongst the employees. They look at things with new eyes, and there is a sense of purpose in the way people conduct themselves. The behavior that you would actually see in the organization are rebuilding cooperation and collaboration, especially if it is merger and acquisition. Then the new teams have been formed, new bonds, new bridges have been created, new vistas have opened up, and how do the leaders address this stage? They, of course, the most of it, the things which are there in the stage are more positive than negative. They need to reinforce the purpose of the change, and refresh the vision of the organization, align to the new the change which has happened, and the new scenario. Continue to communicate the vision, what the employees are seeing and what is yet to come. Develop a transition plan when they will receive information, training, and support. In fact, the training would have already started in the previous stage. Continue with those training. Give your employees parts to play in that transition. Not only people who have come forward in the stage two, but try and involve all the employees who have moved on to the next stage, and give them some part to play. And that way, the buy-in would be much faster. Okay, so these are the three stages. The stage of changing is this is the second stage of living identification. In this stage, the change actually happens, right? Some of the techniques of managing the changes, identification with role models, or giving people the role model to identify with, scanning the environment for solutions and learning by trial and error. And in this stage, it may be a better idea to bring in external expert to drive the change, and bring in new concepts into the organization for the change to happen. And say stage three, in the rephrasing stage, you basically try and establish the new world order. Try to make the change sustainable in the long run, and pass on the baton. And how do you pass on the baton? The baton is passed on to the new employees who would continue the change process. And at this stage, the values and attitude, and the culture, these become very, very important to pass on to the new employees. And because the employees who started the change, they would move out. They would either retire or move out of the organization. But the change should not be person driven, but it should be process driven. So for it to be process driven, the process must be established. Process must be it must become second nature for the people who are there in the organization and the people who join the organization after the change has started. So that's the rephrasing model. Okay. So any questions so far on Levin's three-stage process? No? Okay. So let's move on to the next model, that is John Carter's eight-step model of change. Right. In fact, he has written a book on the eight-step model. He has also written a book on the first stage, that is urgency. So there are two books on this, and the book which I was talking about, our iceberg is melting. That's also by John Carter. That's a story which actually easily understandable manner. It gives this eight-step model of change. So when you are reading that story and think of this eight-step model, and you would actually recognize these eight steps in that story, and in a fun manner. You would also look at the characters in that story. The characters are some of the characters are like Fred. Fred is the main character who actually hits upon the idea of change, need for change. He stumbles upon. He is the first to stumble upon the iceberg melting, and there are people like Alice who take that idea forward. There are people like Buddy who supports who supports Freight in this process. There are people like the professor. There are people like Louis, who is a wise man, and he has that 8% council. And there are, of course, people like no-nos who would oppose any change whatsoever. And there are ways of handling the no-nos in organizations. All right, so the eight stages of change suggested by John Carter are creating urgency, uh, forming a powerful coalition, create a vision of change, communicating the vision, empowering action, create quick wins, build on change, and make change stick. And these eight stages, Carter again put those eight stages into three buckets. The first three stages are put in a bucket which is creating the climate for change, and the next three stages are engaging in enabling the organization for change. And the third bucket is implementing and sustaining for change. So we will look at each one of these stages. We will deep dive into each one now. Okay, the step one is increase the urgency, right? So any change would start only with a sense of urgency. Like if there is no sense of urgency, the change will not happen. Just imagine there is a ship, right? And the it's a passenger ship, and there's a fire on the deck of that passenger ship. Okay. Now, who and it's a huge ship. It's a cruise ship, and there is a small fire. And who do you think will have a sense of urgency to put out that fire? Would it be the people whose cabins are closer to the source of fire, or somebody whose cabin is very far away, and he is watching this fire from a very great distance. Naturally, it will be the people who are closest to the fire. They would have sense of urgency, right? So similarly, in organizations, the sense of urgency would be with people who are closest to the problem, right? And the other people have to be convinced about that urgency. So the urgency needs to be created. The sense of urgency needs to be transmitted to people who are little away from that problem, for the need for change to be recognized by everyone in the organization. So at this stage, that's stage one, that is to increase the urgency. What works is creating a compelling story, never underestimating how much complacency and fear exists. So there would be no nos. Uh, uh, in fact, the no nos would like awfully outnumber people like Fred, who have actually seen the fire. And it's very important at this stage to create a vision, right? Uh, there was this company who you must have heard about this company, which is what is that company's name? Say for example, Nokia, right? Nokia, it's not that they did not know how to manufacture a smartphone, right? In fact, they were one of the first to invest in the R&D for a smartphone. And at one point of time, say in 90s, late 80s and 90s, they were the uh, mobile manufacturers who almost controlled 80% of the mobile phone market. And by 2006, their market share was less than 1%, and gradually they just faded out of the face of the earth, right? So what actually happened? There's this Harvard Business Review story article, who killed Nokia itself. So it was Nokia who, the hidebound and bureaucratic Nokia organization, who actually stood in their own way uh, and did not let Nokia to get into the smartphone business, right? So it's very important for the organizations to create a compelling story, create a vision, and not give in to to underestimate the complacency or the no-nos in that organization. Uh, no-nos are very real, and they have to be addressed right at the beginning, at stage one itself. What does not work is to make a rational or business case out of it. You have to address the emotions of people when you are creating a story or a vision. And if you are ignoring the no-nos or pushing them under the carpet, they will surface. So they have to be addressed very rigorously. And if you are thinking that you are not the boss, you are not the CEO, and you are powerless, then uh, the change will not happen. And whatever you have discovered, if the iceberg is actually melting, then along with everybody else, you will perish, right? So don't underestimate uh, your own power to lead a change effort. Don't give up. So the common pitfalls at this stage is underestimating the difficulty of driving people out of the comfort zones, also to address the no-nos, and becoming paralyzed by risks. Right. These are some of the things which works, which doesn't work, and some common pitfalls. The second is to build the guiding team. So you have to necessarily enlist support, no matter who you are. You may be the CEO, you may be the MD, you may be somebody in the senior management or even middle or junior management. You have to enlist the support within the organization first. You have to find your own allies to take the change agenda forward. If you do not get your analysis, then you are sunk. Especially if you are not at the very top, you will not be able to drive the change agenda. So you have to build a guiding team, and even if you are the CEO, you cannot drive a change agenda alone. So you have to enlist the support of your senior team. You have to enlist the support of your business unit heads and the departmental heads. So you have to get the buy-in of these people for before you can hope to hope for the change effort to succeed. So the second stage is build the guiding team. Third stage is get the vision right, and the vision must be a little emotional, a little emotional. Like when in the 80s, the steel giant, which is Tata Steel, they had they were actually in the dumps because sale was coming in a big way, and other steel manufacturers they had upped their efforts. China was coming in a big way and capturing the Indian market. So they had to do something very fast, and they had to change. They had to create a vision, and they came up with things like there were a set of ads which actually came, and it had more of emotional content than any, appealing to the region or being rational about it. One of the ads, which was, if I remember correctly, we also make steel. That was so. Apart from so they highlighted how they are giving back to the society. They have a much bigger purpose in the society than just making steel, right? And that actually stuck. It stuck in the psyche of their own employees. It's also stuck in the psyche of the people at large, and they were able to pull themselves out of the hole they found themselves in. So very, very important for your vision to be grounded in emotions, right? So get your vision right. Fourth is to communicate the buy. So communication is very, very important in any change effort. And in fact, maybe next class we will discuss communication in greater detail. Suffice is to say here is that the content of the communication and the periodicity of communication, who speaks to whom, all those things are very, very important in communication regarding change to create buy-in amongst your stakeholders. Fifth stage is empowered action. right? Once you have got the buy-in of your employees or stakeholders, you need to empower them to we are dealing with human beings, right? So they need to feel that they are being useful, and they never insult their intelligence. So give them responsibilities, give them responsibilities to walk, to act, give them responsibility and authority to take the new vision forward. And that's how the change is going to stick. Empower action. The sixth stage is to create short-term wins. Uh, uh, when I was with NTPC, I was part of the merger and acquisition team, and NTPC used to against the outstandings. It used to take over some plant or other of the state electricity boards. Now, the people, and along with the plant and machinery, some people will also be coming along with the, and mind you, they are all state government employees, right? So they are an entirely different breed altogether. So now, how to win them over? So what we used to do is we would create short-term wins, which we used to call the low-hanging fruit. So, what were the low-hanging fruit to win them over? One is like their the the colonies used to be very very shabby, and as soon as NTPC would move in, they would try and they will repaint the houses. The colony would be cleaned up. The, any plumbing work or any other work which needs to be done in the, so people are impacted straight away at a very very personal level. So it worked, and they from the word go, they started supporting the new management which came in. So creating short-term goals and blocking the low-hanging fruits are very very important in a change management process. Step seven is don't let up. Like don't declare victory in the straight away, and rest on your laurels, because the change, it requires time. It requires time to set in. Even when you feel that change has happened and you can rest, you would be surprised that the old order of old people do go back to the old way of behaving. So when they relapse, it becomes very difficult for them to bring them back onto the new world order. So don't let up. That's the second. That's the seventh step. And finally, making the change stick. Right. So in this stage, what works are telling stories. In fact, those who are familiar with storytelling, you would know that a story is worth a small story is worth more than thousands PPT slides. So create stories, create success stories, and tell those stories to people. Let people tell your stories to other people. So that those are uh, ways to make the change stick. And of course, the what we had discussed about acculturation or passing on the baton to the new employees so that they carry the change forward, and they believe in the change and carry the change forward so that it becomes second nature. So that's the last step, 8. All right. So yeah. So today we did two models, Levin's model and John Cotter's 8-step model. I would strongly suggest that you read that book. It's a story, Our Iceberg is Melting. And if you are interested, you can also read the book by John Cotter. I think the name of the book is just Change. Yeah, 8
Heart
steps.
of change.
Sorry?
Heart of change, sir.
Art of Change. Yeah. So even if you don't want to read the whole book, maybe you can read a summary of it. That's so better than not knowing that book at all. Yeah, that's good. So next week, what we'll do is we will talk about communication, how to. Yeah. So Bhumi has asked, sir, would you please share the PPT in the Google Classroom? Yes, I will. I will share the PPTs. All right. Okay. So that's it. Unless you have any questions, we will meet next week.
Sir, you had parked my question.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I have parked your question. Okay. So you had asked what to do with the no-nos, right? Now that we have discussed all the 8 stages, where do you think no-nos will be addressed? Which is the stage to address the no-nos?
So they have been addressed throughout.
Yeah, no. If you are the leader, right, and you have seen the no-nos in your organization, at which stage you would address the no-nos? That's the question for you to answer.
Second stage, sir, not the unfreezing, but in the second stage.
Okay. All right. Anybody else would like to answer this? At what stage you would answer or you would address this? Mostly, yes, you are right. You would address this at, of course, you will be aware of the no-nos in the first stage, but at the second stage, when you are creating a powerful coalition, at that stage, because mostly the no-nos who have a voice in the organization, they are very powerful people. Mind you, they are not pushovers. They are very, very powerful people. Now, unless if you there are 2 or 3 ways in which you can address the no-nos. One is to make them uh, not matter in the new scheme of things. The and One of the ways in which you can achieve your goal is you can transfer them to a place and give them a good designation, but with no power, or to no power to influence the change which is happening, right? Say for example, if you are say US based company and you have a very powerful no in your headquarters, you send the no to say Hong Kong or to Shanghai, where you have created a new business or new business unit, and you send this person to handle that. You give this person huge send off and praise him to the sky, and about his ability to handle new businesses. and so that he's away from the place where the change is happening, and clip his wing not to affect the change which is happening negatively. That's one way of handling it. Second way of handling could be a little more harsh. Maybe that person can actually be asked to go. Right? There are organizations who are very convinced about uh, and that's the ultimate of file. Another could be it's called ring fencing the no-nos. Ring fencing is basically to surround the no-nos with positive people, right? So that the moment the no opens his mouth to speak ill about the new initiative, there would be other opinions who would actually be talking in favor of the change to happen, right? That's called ring fencing the no-nos. So there are some techniques, 3 or 4 techniques, which the leaders can use to clip the wings of no-nos. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. There was another element of time. Like, do we, when we are planning change
Yeah,
in healing these all stages,
yeah.
uh, time an important factor, or you just decide as you roll along?
See, time is an important factor. Like no change can be never ending, right? But you have to give time for change to happen. Like you were talking about, what, 15 days of training? That's actually too little. I don't know what change you were trying to bring in, but 15 days for your learning goes through phases. It goes through cognition, it goes through behavior, it goes through say making it attitude or a second nature. So from cognition takes time, for getting the information and making that information be part of you. It takes time, right? From cognition to the behavior, it minimum it takes maybe 3 months to 6 months. From the behavior to making it second nature, it may take a year or more, right? So you have to give time. You have to give time to the so if you want change to happen overnight, it will not, right? So time, although it need not be never ending, but you have to give time to change.
So 1 year, which organization? I do not know. इतना सारा time तो कोई organization नहीं
मैं
दे
आपको बता
पाएगी.
रहा हूँ ना,
You're
like
saying.
like if you want culture change, depending on what change you want. If you want culture change, 6 or 7 years is minimum. If you
Oh,
want the culture to change in 3 months time or 6 months time, you are living in a fool's
that time.
paradise,
Hmm.
right? So
Hmm.
I did a OD intervention for a logistic company in 2019, right? And we tried to. I mean, we were dealing directly with the MD of that company, and he wanted the change to happen in 6 months' time. We said it's impossible, right? So finally, we agreed to 18 months, but he was so he wanted things to happen yesterday. So after 9 months, this contract was terminated, right? So depending on what change you want, like there are some changes which can happen in 3 months' time, but there are some changes which would require 6 to 7 years for it to bear any fruit, right? Especially if it is behavior change or if it is culture change. 6 months is what it's foolish
Yes,
to
that is what
expect
I
any
was asking,
change.
sir. That, when you talk to the CEOs of the companies, they are like,
Yeah. There are CEOs, there are MDs who although this MD who I'm talking about, he is US educated. He had an MBA from the US, but he had no clue as to how culture change happens, right? There you are, right? So depending on what change, I'm not saying every change would take 6 7 years, but I'm saying some changes would definitely take a number of years to come. Yeah.
Yes.
So
What is
especially
the
if it is,
fastest, like behavioral is understandable. You are adopting a new process. So
yeah.
can that be faster? That is what I was asking.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. Why not? Why not? Suppose you are changing from say manual typewriters adopting say computers for your although the training would depending on how many people you are looking at, training would be easier, but changing the mindset of people, especially if you are working in with a company which is in the government sector or public sector, where people are unionized, and there are ideological barriers, there are political barriers. Then it may take about couple of years, but it may be easier in the private sector, where either you do it or you go, right? Depending on which organization also, one is depending on the change you are trying to bring in. Second is also the kind of organizations you are dealing with. So so uh, so all those things, there are many parameters which would, I can't tell you like that there's a thumb up rule that this change will take this
but
much
on
of
an
time.
average, 6 months is not a very huge, long time for change, especially
No,
because most changes will require behavioral change.
exactly. 6 months is not long. It's not long. It's
Yeah,
it's it's,
got it.
it's
Thank
part
you,
of
sir.
the course,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, guys. Thank you so much. We will meet again next week.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Right. Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.